Yo! I feel like I'm at a Rotary meeting. Good afternoon. It's so nice to see so many people here, our concerned citizens of what is actually going on. And you can participate in this and have an influence on the thinking that is going on. We have staff here, our planners, they're all around. Obviously, our town manager, our town attorney, council member Taylor, Clement, Bill Pate, Ann's over there, sorry.
Carol, is your mic on?
They say it is.
I would have to. Here,
And I'm usually so loud that the mics are not.
Test.
It's on. You might need to see my friend Kate Tamala, but she's not doing that anymore. I'm sure Paul will be here. If you've looked outside, he's probably dodging raindrops here. But we do thank you all for being here. I think this is a great opportunity that you all have been given and that we've been given. And I thank Matt for putting this together and to listen to all of us. This is a process, and it's not an overnight process. So thank you all for being here, and I'm going to turn it over to them so we can get this started. So again, thanks for being here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Let me add my welcome and good afternoon as well. Good thing we didn't start the meeting at 12:15. We'd all be drenching wet. So today is a briefing. I'm going to present to you a lot of information. I'm not taking any stance on the information or anything. It's just setting up our planning process. I'll go through kind of what we've done, but I'm going to divide us up into what we've done in engagement so far and what we've done in terms of our data and analysis. And then obviously we'll take questions as long as you want to stay. I've got nothing else planned, so we can be here forever.
Matt?
Yes?
Matt, before you start, Matt, Michael, quick.
Please.
Just in order to not set up Matt for unreasonable expectations of what this all is. My name is BJ Grieve. I'm with the planning department with the town, and I just wanted to introduce why this is happening here today for any members of the audience that are sort of wondering what they're supposed to do or say or think or feel or hear or et cetera. Matt is a consultant that has been hired to work with the town on a new comprehensive long-range plan for the future of the town. And Matt has spent the first 6 months of the project researching our town and talking to all kinds of people and listening and just doing an absolute ton of research. He concluded that a few weeks ago by making a presentation to the Community Advisory Committee, which is a group of people who volunteered to help sort of be a sounding board for the process. When he gave that presentation, he had so much great information in it from all the research he had done that staff was watching, and we literally just leaned to each other and said, hey, the planning board and the town council should see this. This is pretty good stuff. And so this came of that alone. So all this is really an effort to get the planning board and the town council together, which literally requires an act of public notice and all kinds of stuff. It has to be done very formal because you have all those public bodies in the room. And so this presentation is what Matt has already given to the Community Advisory Committee, but we thought it would be great for the planning board and town council to see it. And because they're together in the room, it's open to the public. We advertised it, and that's what this is. So I wanted to set that expectation. This isn't anything more fancy than that. It's just that when you get these groups together, you got to make a big deal out of it. So thanks.
Yeah, no votes or actions today. All right. I did want to at least let you know what you got yourselves into, though, because you're giving me some of your time. So in terms of an agenda, we have our opening remarks. I want to make sure everybody understands, and we're going to celebrate what we've accomplished so far in the planning process, and I want to lay out kind of where we're going and when we're going to get there, because it's about to get really exciting. As was mentioned, the immersion kind of process and all that is great, but now we're going to start generating stuff. And as I joked in a meeting earlier this morning, nothing's controversial until I get the map out and stuff, right? Because now we're drawing lines and writing words and things like that. So it's about to get exciting. I do want to kind of update you on where we are in the engagement process and how we've been opportunistic in that process. And then go through what I call the book report series, which are physical assessments. And I'll present some information from there, hopefully some stuff that'll get us thinking about where to go into the future. And then again, I'll answer any questions you have. As long as we have questions, I'm willing to stay. So as I've shown to the Community Advisory Committee several times, I just always start with this slide because it sets the tone for how we're doing our project. And what we're doing here is looking for 3 different targets, but where those targets overlap is the sweet spot where we're trying to write the plan. So in terms of community engagement, I'm going to go over everything we've been doing and what we plan to do moving forward, but we really want to make sure this is your plan. One of the things I, again, said in a conversation this morning, just to be frank, is that I am here because I have a lot of experience writing these plans. I have a lot of experience hosting these types of planning processes to make sure we get the right fingerprints on this so that it's a community document. I do not live here, I do not work here, and so when I'm done, I'm done, right? And so if we don't do this process right, where we have the champions in the room and the staff and the officials and everybody else, the plan kind of doesn't go anywhere, right? So that's why we're trying to have this process as transparent as we can. We schedule meetings like this when it's an opportunity to do so, and we're going to keep doing that because the success of this plan is really on the stewards after adoption. And so we're really focused on that, and we think the buy-in happens because of the community engagement process that we try to host. We are doing data and analysis. I've told people long ago, visioning is good, hallucination's dangerous. So when you do that, we want to keep a foot on the ground in terms of our data and analysis, and when we're saying, can that really happen? I say, yeah, it can. It might be 100 years, but it can happen. You know, so those are the kind of things we'll have conversations about. Make sure what we're doing, either do we have an example where it's been done somewhere else? Do we have some data that can support that so that you have confidence when you're making these decisions, whether you're making town investments or whether applications are coming in front of you? Do you have the fodder and the defense to be able to talk back and forth with those applicants? And then again, these best practices, we're going to bring some ideas to you. I'm not trying to change what Southern Pines is, but we do have some other ideas out there. If you're like, you know, we've always wanted to do more conservation, or we've always wanted to have a technical program or something. There's a good chance we've seen that before because we work around the country. This is close to, if you made me count, it's probably close to my 50th plan that I've written. If you write more than 2 a year, you're not doing a service to the community because you're not really immersing yourself in there. And I've worked in 19 different states writing these plans. And the one thing it taught me was just, there's no one way to plan a community. And so I really try to safeguard the process more than the product. That document takes care of itself, and hopefully you see that as we kind of review to what we've done so far. So I've told you a lot about us just being opportunistic, and you know, I don't want anyone to think we just fly by the seat of our pants. We do have a process that we follow. But again, we look for opportunities along the way. I'm not going to pretend you can read these words, but I'm going to just tell you a couple of highlights we have here. We define our process in terms of planning cycles. And the reason we call them cycles is because then we like to check in after some of these cycles have occurred. So planning cycle 1 was really just getting the house in order, data exchanges, us getting to visit the area, talk with staff. It's really just kind of the get up and running, set the launching pad. Planning cycle 3 that you see here is what we've been working on for months now. And that's been where we're trying to understand the community. It's DNA, it's themes, it's trends, why things head where they do, decisions you've made. I've got to hear things about like a small hotel you were looking at, or some other things so I'm trying to understand the whys. Because I can look on paper and read a document on decisions, but I'm trying to get the whys out of it as well. So that's what we've been doing for the last several months. And then we're going to be moving into, really after this meeting, we can call it moving into what we call the growth framework. The framework is just loosely trying to define where the compass is going to point for the plan that we're going to be writing. It starts out very loose and it'll just become more refined with every pass that we take at it, and it'll actually culminate in a document that will be brought forward through Planning Board to Town Council for recommendation and adoption. As part of that process, we have some interesting things coming up in January that I'll go through when I talk more about the process in terms of showing you different ways and different choices that Southern Pines has moving forward. We also actually have an urban designer on staff as part of our team who's going to look at 3 different focus areas in great detail. So we'll actually be doing some hand renderings and drawings and concepts here as part of our process as well. And a lot of that is done to prove the point of some of our recommendations or to be catalyst sites or those kind of things. And so I'll give you an example of that just to set the tone. Normally when I'm in a meeting like this, I can get everybody on board with some planning concept, whether it's attainable housing, mix of uses, preserved open space, those kind of things. But everybody around the table has a little bit different idea of exactly what that is. And so we all leave thinking we're on the same page, and we find out later we're not. That's what these focus areas are to do, is we actually apply our recommendations to the ground, and we say, is this still what we wanted? Or do we need to make some course adjustments and those kind of things? So that's what the focus areas are about. We do have big emphasis on what's called the action plan. So we're going to try to set you up with, what do you need to do next? One of the most frustrating parts of my job, if I can just be frank with you, is that we spend all this time and energy kind of seeing what we want, where we want to go, but just the way government works and the way the state laws work and those kind of things, the document we're creating for you is a visionary policy document. It has to be updated and implemented through the zoning ordinance, the unified development ordinance, capital project spending, all that kind of stuff that I don't have any control over, right? I'm just trying to get us all pointing in the same direction. Then it has to be implemented, right? So we think the action plan, we try to plant some seeds about what might be the first, second, and third thing you want to do right out of the gate, and then maybe what you might want to do longer term to try to get that process going a little bit. And then again, we will culminate with a project document. This is sort of where we're at in the process, what we've accomplished. So everywhere you see a check mark, we feel that we have finished that process. So again, we've gotten our house in order. We've done our data and analysis. We come up in January, February, and March. We're focusing more on that framework. We are actually looking at different futures right now for the town that we'll be bringing back to you in January. And we're looking at some themes that are starting to emerge based on our engagement and our data and analysis. Generally speaking, I always welcome good pressure. I think it was the first week we were hired that the pilot article said we're going to have this done in 10 months. I think that's what we're trying to do. We are going to try to honor that, right? But the one thing again, because I'll just say it while I have the audience here, I make no guarantees what happens once the adoption process starts. I don't know how long that's going to take. So we're going to hurry up and get it in the summer months in order to make sure we have a document that we can vet with the community and go through the formal process. But you all are going to control some of that schedule, given who's around the table right now. So in terms of some big milestones to be thinking about as we move forward and for people to try to make sure you stay engaged with us, right now in January, we are working on what's called the scenario planning and likely impacts analysis. So if this was 15 years ago, 20 years ago, when I was done with my data and analysis, I would say, I'm an expert, so I'm going to tell you what I think your best future should be, what's your best foot forward. And then I would educate you, defend you, and then potentially ignore you if you didn't agree with me. And then we go to adoption, and I'd see how I do. That no longer happens, thankfully, anymore. So the new process that's really been since the early 2000s has focused a lot on what's called scenario planning. So right now I'm bringing 5 and actually I think 6 different futures to you as part of this planning process. And so they're going to look at the whole gamut of things I've heard so far through the engagement that I've had, as well as what the data is telling me. And I'm going to give you options. So some people say, no more growth. Some people say, bring on the growth. I'm looking at both. Some people say, let's have dense development with a mix of uses and just all this energy going on in a very small area. We're looking at that. Some people are saying, no way. That changes the character of what Southern Pines is. So we're looking at it, well, what happens if we spread out a little bit? Or what happens if somebody asks me, well, what is the impacts of just the committed projects already, what's been approved? We're looking at that as a benchmark. So we're looking at all different viewpoints. So just know when we come to you with these 6 kind of futures, like I say, it's fortune telling that I'm doing, we're not advocating that you pick one of the 6. We're just trying to show you different things we've heard and what that actually means for you going forward. So they're to teach lessons, and sometimes they're intentionally extreme. So you might say, what is this person doing? He's completely changing what Southern Pines would be to me. Good, react to that and give us that feedback so we know that's too far, right? So just be ready when we bring these things out. There are options being brought out to you. We're not trying to just have you pick one off the shelf and that's the one we'll use for the document. So that all, we're working our tails off right now in January to be ready for that. There's a lot that goes into it. There'll be an event on January 26th here in this building. It'll be a physical event where we have it, it's called our Growth Choices Workshop. I will present to you sort of what we have, but it won't be sitting in your chairs. We'll actually set up the different scenarios, and you'll be able to float around and learn more about them. But we don't want to go too fast and just assume you either made it or you didn't that day. So in February, we're going to really try to focus on a comment period. And that comment period will have what's called a story map survey, so you can review the maps, and we'll ask you questions. We may schedule some events where you can just drop in and we can speak with you. We're really kind of being flexible on how we do that, but we want to make sure the community understands what the options are, and we get the feedback just like we've been getting good feedback so far in our conversations. And we're not going to rush it. So the month of February, we're really going to spend that. I apologize, it's the shortest month of the year, but just for our schedule, we have to get it in. But we will spend the entire month doing it. Then we get into spring. With the feedback that we've gotten on those different futures and the trade-offs, and just frankly, I'm going to put you in situations where you have to compare, contrast, prioritize, those kind of things. We're going to then come back and bring that information back to our Community Advisory Committee, and we're going to try to start putting pen to paper. And like I said, this is when it's like, you know, it's been kumbaya so far, but this is where we'll start to get some friction and things as we start to put pen to paper. But we actually want to get a vision and principles down. We want to get what's called the future land use map. For those of you who aren't just living and breathing this every day, the future land use map for every parcel within the planning area has an intended use or an intended development style or pattern or character. Nothing is vacant on a future land use map because you don't know what's going to come in as an application, so you have to be ready. And so for that reason, we have this future land use map created so you're prepared for whatever comes in. That creates demand. Right? Where development is, how intense it is, what type it is, creates demand for services. So we will then turn our focus to an infrastructure investment strategy. How do you support this? How do you make sure the faucets still turn on? How do you make sure you can still get through the traffic signal? Those kind of things we'll be looking at as part of that process. And then we'll end up with some policy statements, which would be the things you actually consider and apply when you have a development application come in. These are the things you're trying to hold it to in terms of your standard. I think, if you're open to it, that if this meeting is or was successful in your eyes, that we have another one at that point. I think it might be good for you to know kind of what are the big ideas. It'd be good for you to tell me whether you like or dislike those ideas before I go through all the effort of writing it in great detail. Let's do a litmus test. So I'm thinking that we might do something like this event again, sort of towards April. And then we'll do those design drawings, because now once we've gotten some feedback on those big ideas, we can have our designers test them and bring them back to you. Then we'll have another community event called the Draft Recommendations Workshop. Frankly, I call this sort of our Alice in Wonderland event. We take the report that's been written and we blow it up into really big pages, and we ask you all to help us react to those recommendations and the like. It's helping us write the action plan. We're trying to see what the vibe is in the community for these different recommendations so we can prioritize them accordingly with town staff. We will spend the summer writing this. And again, I think we started it was August, right? So June, July, we'll try to have a document for you to meet our 10-month. And then we can start the adoption process at that point. Notice my arrow doesn't stop because you all get to control when we're done at that point. So a lot of stuff going on, but I just want to make sure we're very transparent on kind of what steps are left to do, where we're at. You know, if you're watching on TV or you want to take a picture of this slide or you want to go to our project website, and you can access that through the town website as well, you can always keep tabs on where we are in this process. Okay, so I told you I was going to talk about engagement and our book report, so I'll start with engagement. These are some of the things that we've been doing, and I'd have to count, but frankly, some of these things we didn't even envision during the contract. Like we've just really, if there's an opportunity out there, we've been taking it. But we did hold a community ideas exchange workshop in this room. And then we had a digital twin of it live on for a couple weeks afterwards, and we got some feedback that way. We've met with our CAC 3 times now, and we will continue to meet with them as you see in our schedule. We've had 57 different conversations, I call them, community conversations, with just all different types of people. And some of them have kept us around a table. A lot of them I've been able to actually go into the community. I got to see the hounds, for example, and so I'm trying to experience everything that it is to be here and be a member of the community. And right now, if you take my notes, I've got 824 comments that have come out of those meetings already that I've been able to just kind of have swirling in my head, and I can sort them in different ways and the like, just so that it helps me kind of understand what's going on. Just in case somebody asks, I'll just tell you right now, the reason I'm not publishing those comments is because I was very forthcoming in the interviews that I was an open book and you can tell me whatever you wanted. And so I'm using those in my tool in order to kind of know what's going on, but I'm not publishing it with the names next to them and all that kind of stuff because I want to honor the conversations that we were having. We also had something called On the Table. Those were events, small group events, that were actually either organized through the town. They did a wonderful job on that, but also organically, people just volunteered. We had what was called a host toolkit. It's still on our project website if you want to host one of your own events, but it's a guided kind of conversation. And then when you're done with that conversation, you send it in, and that's just more information that we have to react to and consider as we go through the process. You can still do one of those if you want to. We've also found out very early that it's easier to join somebody else's party than have your own sometimes. So we've been very deliberate about trying to be part of other celebrations or events or things that are going on within the town. And hats off to town staff, especially BJ and Rachel, for all they've been doing. If you notice the pictures at those events, they're the ones hosting it most of the time. Although I did get a First Friday taste. That was pretty fun. But they've been doing a ton of work on that as well. We had what was called a BYOQ event, Bring Your Own Question event. That was at the Growler, right? It was at the Growler. And we were just an open book. We said, ask me anything you want. It was the start of our process. It was a lot of fun. The Growth Choices Workshop, again, will be on January 26th. That's where we're going to bring to you different options to react to. There'll be a survey that occurs after that for the month of February. The draft plan workshop that we talked about, and then the briefings and hearings that we have to have in order to adopt a plan. So all of that is kind of in play in terms of different activities. We also learned very early in this process that people don't all communicate the same way. So we've been very deliberate in terms of how we've tried to interact with people as well. And again, Rachel's been doing such a fantastic job that these numbers are probably old now anyways. You can probably give me bigger numbers, but we've had over 400 visits to the project website so far. These pop-up events, like I was telling you, whether it's tree lighting or New Year's Eve or Halloween and the like. We have had our Project First meetings where we've been doing them. Some of them have been in person, a couple have been virtual. I've been able to be part of a couple of virtual meetings, like with a young professionals group and some of those types of things. We have done as many co-branded meetings as we can. There's been 800 different flyers that have been handed out so far as part of the process. We've hung up 25 posters in different locations. If you have an idea of a good location you think gets a lot of traffic, let us know. We'll put up a poster there for events. The pilot has been fantastic and giving us good coverage and press, and I appreciate that. And so they've run some articles and stuff for us. We've been using Facebook as well as a project newsletter. And then through an email blast, we now have 176 people that if you just want to know what's going on with us, we push out email blasts from time to time. Please feel free to sign up through the project website if you want to do that. Speaking of the website, people always seem to want to have the pulse as one of the indicators of how well your project's going, so we always go to the website. The good part for me is you see the activity. This is from when we started it in August all the way. This is November 28th, so it's not the most current, but you see a lot of spikes. If you correlate those spikes, it'll be for when they did a pop-up event or we did some type of an announcement or a meeting. So we are getting good traffic after every time we come out in the community. People are coming to the website afterwards, which has been really great. Another thing that we're doing unique to this project is a community engagement dashboard. What we have found over the years that a lot of times the people who readily participate in a planning process don't represent the entire community for which they live in. And so one of the things we've been doing is as people participate in our events, we've been trying to track them. Now, it hasn't been 100% participation because some people don't feel comfortable answering some of these questions. That's okay. I'm not trying to force ourselves on them. But we are trying to track those who will volunteer that information at events to see how it compares to the community as a whole. So for example, if you look by gender in the community, it's 55% female, 45% male. When you look at who participated with us, we're at 58 female, 40 male. So we're doing pretty good there. When it comes to home ownership, though, 60% of the people in the community own and 40% rent. In terms of participation, 90% of the people we've spoken with own their home. So we've got to get out to either the complexes or something. We've got to kind of address that number. Same thing with age and income. We tend to be trending older and more wealthy than the community as it's stratified throughout the community. So we have to do better on that on the second half of the planning process. But this has been a great tool for us to try to see, are we really getting the full community picture when we're going through our engagement process? And so that's been nice to look at as well. So one of the things that's been really interesting, and these document pages that you see here are from a different comprehensive plan I wrote, so just know that right away. It was in Lewiston, Maine, but it was very similar to how you are in Southern Pines, in that as I was having these conversations, I found out that there really are just different viewpoints of what Southern Pines is to somebody, and how they interact with it every day, and what it means, and what challenges and opportunities they have, and the like. And so it's interesting. We're starting to see some of that occur here. Whether you're a long-term resident, all the history and accomplishments with West Southern Pines, what it means to be in horse country, what does it mean to be in a golf course community? I mean, it just goes on and on the list. And so one of the things we're kind of thinking about as we're cataloging all these comments is kind of where are they coming from? Because if there are trends of comments coming from certain groups, we want to try to address that in the CLRP document that we have. So again, we might be looking at that as well. And then this will just be my plug as I close out engagement. January 26th in this room will be our Growth Choices Workshop. I'm going to pretend like it's a must-attend event. You have to be here. But we also are not foolish enough to say if you miss that date, you just missed every opportunity in the world. So in February, we'll be repeating some engagement events and things so you can get your comments in. But if you really want to hear firsthand what's going on, if you can come on the 26th, would be fantastic. Again, we're kind of building the airplane while we fly it sometimes. Go ahead. 6 to 8, is it? 6 to 8 is a drop-in. And as you know, sometimes like we build the airplane while we fly. So one time I did this and we did a simulcast. So we had multiple locations, and while I was presenting, people in other rooms were hearing it like an infomercial, and then we did all kinds of stuff. So we're still figuring out all the details of it, but it will occur in this room from 6 to 8 p.m. on January 26th, and that'll kick off that community conversation about growth, development, preservation, and character moving forward. Okay. So I told you the second thing we've been doing a lot is what, again, I'm just going to call it the book report series. It's been our data inventory and our analysis, looking at existing conditions and emerging trends. And we have 6 reports that they're kind of coming out in. And some communities, I'll put this all together. It's over 100 pages, and so I don't think anybody will download it or read it. So we've kept it kind of in the topics in case you have interest. So we have land use and community character, the environment, market and economics, supporting infrastructure, transportation, and we also had our professionals do sort of a policy and ordinance review, not only to see what's happening in Southern Pines, but what's happening at your edges, right? Because what they do affects you, and so we've looked at that as well. Those reports will be forthcoming, but I'm going to review some of the stuff now with you. So again, this is just a couple of sentences out of the report. The part I want to highlight to you is that this is live information. So we're publishing it with a date very soon, just to put it out into the general public, but they're alive. They're going to keep going through iterations and those kind of things, and they will actually be harvested, portions of it, for the actual CLRP document, the final document. But it's not the final word on anything. So I just want to make sure people understand that. You know, sometimes it's, what do they say? Don't let good enough be the, or don't let perfect be the enemy of good enough, that kind of stuff. We could spend months getting every exact word correct here and things we're finding out, but we just have to get it out too at some point. So some of this stuff will continue to be revised as you all read it. If you see something you'd like to ask us to add, consider, those kind of things, let us know. These are live documents as they come through. So they will be reviewed and refined over time as new thoughts and ideas come up in the planning process. So right now, if you look on the left, they are based off of existing data sets or adopted documents or community conversations we've had or some of the things we've seen driving around the community. So it's really kind of benign and safe at this point. It's kind of based on what we could learn if we just got dropped into the community. As we go through this, we're going to use some of this information to frame the conversations that we're going to have, starting in January with the Growth Choices Workshop, and then going through the recommendations, the vision and policies and all that other stuff. We're always going to keep going back to the data to see where we're at. And again, we're looking out for about 20 years for here, but we also look at full build out as well. So we're looking at both conditions as we take this information into account. We did share these documents with the Community Advisory Committee. We gave them to them at their meeting on November 14th, I think it was, or thereabouts. They got us comments back by the 12th, so they kept us busy during the holiday period, and we're this close to being done. There were a couple of comments we got that we should really, local folks, it was hard to reach them over the holidays or hard for us to be available over the holidays. So I've got a couple of minor conversations I have to finish a couple of the documents, and then they will be released. So in January, they'll be coming out available through the project website. Okay, so as I present this information to you today, I need to make sure you understand what the boundary is of what we're talking about. So when you think of Southern Pines, you think of the area that's in green, and good luck trying to describe all the jagged lines that form your town boundaries. It's not intuitive, but it's very unique. It's a beautiful shape, right? But if you look at the area in purple, that's what's called your extraterritorial jurisdiction. So under North Carolina General Statute, as a community, you are allowed to have your zoning powers and the like extend beyond your town limits. It's a power given to you by the state of North Carolina in order to review development applications things. So for the comprehensive long-range plan, the CLRP that I have to shepherd the process and write the first draft document on, both of those areas are in my planning area. So that you see in black, when I give you the numbers and things in these slides to follow, it's for the total planning area. Okay? So some of these numbers, like if you see population or something like, oh, that's bigger than the number I thought it was. It's probably because the geography is bigger than what you're used to using as well. Okay, so we start with the market, and again, in many ways, I'm just proving that I've done my homework because I'm going to tell you some things you already know, but hopefully I can uncover some things as well that we've been able to see your community that maybe you haven't stopped to look at it in that way already. The first one is a game of Mr. Obvious. You're growing fast, right? Everyone's feeling the pressures of that, but when we put it to numbers, you see that you're actually growing almost twice as fast as the state is as a whole, and you're growing quicker than Moore County as well. If we have to peg a number right now, the best planning source is telling you're at 15,909 people. And again, that's growing faster than your surrounding areas. So you're a leading growth center, both within the state and the region and the county. Now this is really interesting. A lot of places we work, especially like when I work up in the Northeast, they're all getting older or they're leaving, right? This is really interesting when we found the information here. As a whole, I'm not going to pretend you can read all these blue lines, but as a whole, North Carolina and Moore County are older than you, right? You are a young community. And so as you look at this, especially like in the 35 to 44 range and the 25 to 34 range, you are far outpacing both the county and the state. Now, a lot of that has to do with your neighbor, right? Fort Bragg and some other things. But also, this is a place to come because we're hearing from the engagement process about all the entrepreneurs, some of the families, just the young energy that's coming in. And that has something to do when we look at correlations and connections. We're looking at where do they try to live. And so that's one of the obstacles that we've been hearing about. But again, you're a much younger community than most in the state. Yes?
So when you did population change by age group, do you compare our current population demographics on age to other communities, or is it just the growth change? Because when I moved to town, it was very much a older community.
Yep.
And since, in those 15 years, whatever, it feels like it has gotten younger, but I don't know that our population would be necessarily a young population. I just feel like we're catching up to what everybody else is.
That's correct. Yeah, so to be very clear, these are the people who have come since 2010. What type of people are coming to the community? So to your point, it's pulling the mean, pulling the average and all those kind of things into this. But of the people who have come in the last 12 years, they are younger in demographic and age. This was also interesting to me is because, again, I go back to depending who I'm having a meeting with, I hear very different things about what it's like to live and interact and thrive in Southern Pines. And so there is a large group of households in 2022 that made over $200,000 as a household. And I got to hear a lot about what their opportunities and struggles were being in the community. I also got to hear a lot, though, from a band of folks who are in that $35,000 to $50,000 range. They have a different outlook of what it's like to live in Southern Pines, both the good and the bad. And then also recognizing that there is a sizable population of folks here who are making much less than the reported mean if you take the whole number. And so we need to recognize some of those challenges as well for those communities. And so as we look at this, we need to really look at what's driving some of these numbers instead of just the one overall average. And this, using income, is a great way to kind of prove that point. This number was a little bit scary to me as we pulled it together. It's looking at how much of your income do you spend on housing every year. And so if you look at Southern Pines and you look at the people who rent, there are over 20% of the people are spending half of their income or more just to pay rent and utilities and the like to be in Southern Pines. If you look at by ownership, you're at like 9% of the people are spending more than half of their income just to have the housing and the costs that go with having housing in this community. So housing affordability is an issue. And as you look at it, oh well, hold on, I got another slide coming, but let me also talk about where they're working. So this is where Southern Pines residents work. So you live in Southern Pines and you need to go to your job. That job might be in Southern Pines, but it might be outside. The three highest categories are accommodation and food services, healthcare and social assistance, and retail trade. Your proximity to the hospital on the other side of the circle, some of those kind of things make some of these no-brainers. But the reason I starred this other one in yellow, professional and technical services, is that's really the first profession that comes up where you can work from home. These other professions I've been presenting to you, you need to go to a location in order to do your job. So you see which professions here, I'll read it to you, it's actually 5% of the people who live here and have to go to a job are in that professional and office type category. And that seems to be the sweet spot or the target of whether you can work from home or not. So we have to consider as we move forward that large percentages of your workers are going to still have to travel to wherever they're going for work. Then we also look, though, of people who work in Southern Pines. They may or may not live here, but the people who work in Southern Pines, what are they doing? And again, you know this of some of your streets, but accommodation and food services, healthcare and social assistance, and retail trade are also some things you're providing a lot of. So one of the things that's interesting as you start to look at that income and how much you're spending and your housing costs and the like is, if you compare, you have a lot of businesses that require the things of workers who already live in your area, but I'm going to show you later on, we're not reaching that equilibrium of where they can stay in Southern Pines. For whatever reason, they're having to either live outside and come into work, or if they work here, they just can't live here. And so we'll get into some of that here in just a minute. So this map is actually from the U.S. Census Bureau, and it shows sort of where the clusters are of jobs within Southern Pines. And you see it's basically downtown, extends down US 1 and out 501. And then you have a couple of isolated areas as well. But a lot of your jobs are more in the southern area. And so we think about that when we're looking at traffic patterns and those kind of things. And then this is what I was telling you earlier about not being able to kind of get that special moment. Every day there's about 9,000 people who drive into Southern Pines to work. There are 4,500 people that leave every day for work. It's only 1,200 people that the U.S. Census Bureau tracks that can live and work in Southern Pines. So again, this has implications for traffic, but also if we want to have questions or discussions about home affordability or attainability, those kind of things. And then these graphics on the left kind of show you where are those people going. So The people that live in Southern Pines, when they go, let's see, people who live in Southern Pines travel to Fort Worth. So they're going out west. The people, and maybe the hospital and the like, when people are coming to work in Southern Pines, they're coming from all directions. And so we have to take that into account when we're looking at the transportation system and some of those kind of things as well. Getting into that housing affordability and attainability issue just a little bit more. Home prices last year rose over 15%. The median sales price, so not the average value or anything, but the actual sales price using Redfin was $475,000 is what the home sold for here. You can see that there were 173 single-family homes and 63 townhomes that were sold over a year. So there's good activity and turnover going on. Just this is our disclaimer, with interest rates and some other things going on, we're not really sure exactly what that's moving forward, but we have our eyes wide open. But what's interesting is over 20% of the homes that sold last year sold for over $700,000. What's interesting is you look, even at the low point from this data provider, they've had to go to less than 300,000 in order to catch the bottom tier of data that they were reporting. So even less than 300,000 is a lot of money for some of those income bands that I was showing you. So you have to take that into account as well. But home prices are increasing here, which you see from the 15%, and they're starting to get out of reach, which is why people have to live outside and work in and those kind of things. There's a lot of interesting phenomena going on. This is also interesting in terms of the rental market. We were able to speak with a couple of renters who have verified or validated this condition, but if you think about it, in terms of rents on available units right now in the newer complexes, if you want a 3-bedroom, you're going to pay over $2,000 a month in rent. Now, it's been a long time since I've rented, but that seems like a lot of money. And when you start to compare it to maybe what a mortgage could be, if you could even get that opportunity, it almost feels like you're paying mortgage level prices for rental. So again, just something to keep track of. Looking at the non-residential categories in terms of this is office for you, your vacancy rates are very low, which means that there's opportunity for more office to come in. You've weathered the pandemic well. I think a lot of that is because some of those uses are spin-offs or medical related. But either way, you've only got a 1.2% vacancy now, which is great. Retail, again, tends to be the same thing. You've bounced back really well since COVID, and so you have a low vacancy rate there. So we should be looking for more opportunities if you want to keep up with market demand in the future. The interesting part is industrial, though. As you drive around, you see a lot of retail. You can find office, but you have to really go to certain places to find the industrial development within the area. And so part of it that we're finding is there just might be a competition for space, where right now on a land that could be suitable for industrial, it's being used for office or something else right now at this point in time. But there is some room for industrial as well going into the future. The other thing is, if you weren't popular enough already, you know that north on the US 421 corridor, there are billions upon billions of dollars being invested. Billions and billions. These are just a couple of them right now. VinFast is a Vietnamese electric car maker. You have a chip maker. You have the Toyota battery plant, and Boom Supersonic is with airline. They are putting in, the last I saw was, 4,000, 5,000 jobs or something like that, all in that corridor. It's amazing. It's the state of North Carolina is #1 priority right now in terms of economic development and the like. And believe it or not, it's close enough to you that boom is going to ripple out this far. Now, it may not be that the workers' housing makes it down this far. Maybe they're in Vass or Carthage or something of that nature. But in terms of some of these executives and the like, they want to tell their friends they're living next to two or whatever it is that they want to tell their friends back home. There is some real pressures that will be coming down from these investments, even down here in Southern Pines. We also did try to look out in the future, and again, this is where we have different growth pressures that we're looking at. These numbers are how much growth would like to come here. This isn't how much you're willing to accept, just to be very clear. This is what the market would like to do. They would like to come here. We haven't decided yet through the planning process whether we have enough room for them or not, frankly. But right now, there are 10,390 homes, at least according to the Census Bureau, occupied homes, because they responded to the survey. When you look out, if you assume a very conservative 1% population growth, which would be much slower than what you've been doing, you can see that when you go out 20 years, you're at 14,234 homes. And if you assume a more moderate 2% growth, you're at 16,639 homes, a 60% increase, right? People are already telling me about traffic and school demand and all that kind of stuff. This is how many people would like to come. So as told you, we go through the infrastructure investment strategy, the impacts analysis, all that kind of stuff. We have to think about what is that right number. The term we've used in previous conversations is what is just big enough, right? What is big enough to get everything you want, but not too big that it starts to over tax your capacity and the like. But you can see up to 16,000 more units if you assume the moderate approach would like to be here. So that's the kind of demand you all are generating to be in your spots. On the non-residential side, there's a healthy amount of growth as well that could come here. You can see the number, 166,000 square feet of office to 500,000 square feet of retail space. The way to kind of think about this, where you see that 500,000 square feet of retail space, a grocery store is like 60 to 80,000, depending which one it is. A Walmart could be anywhere from 150 to 225,000 or larger if it's a super Walmart. What is the target? Do you know offhand? Just to.
Yeah, about 150, I think.
Okay. So, you take 500,000 divided by 150 a few times, that's how many more of those there'd be demand for. And again, whether it can fit and where is a question to be answered in our planning process. We also looked at the environment. I mean, obviously, when we do these things, we're looking at growth and conservation together, not as separate topics or processes. So we start actually with the environment, and we're looking at where water bodies are, where we have wetland type soils, where we have stream buffers we need to protect. And you can see here on the right-hand side of your screen is these are what we call our highly constrained areas for development. We're just assuming these areas cannot develop in the future. And then the next thing I do is I start to look at those and say, how do I connect them for a wonderful greenway system? Or how do I connect them for eco corridors or those kind of things? Because, Mother Nature is undefeated in stormwater management and some of those kind of things. So if we can take advantage of those spots, would be fantastic in our planning process. This is me being an outsider, but I'm also kind of pushing to see what is the appetite or reactions for some other environmental kind of stewardship to go on. So these are pictures from actually a project we did in Manchester, New Hampshire, where they wanted to be the leader of anything they did. So they wanted to be the leader of technology and the leader of that. So they're like, okay, well, as long as you're going to shade the windows on a school, what if they were solar panels instead of just something opaque? What if your parking lots had little windmills in them? You do your rain gardens. These are actually, as long as you're going to have awnings, there's a company that actually has air purifiers that you could have every other awning be an air purifier. I don't know what Southern Pines, but I'm just bringing this up to have the conversation that what other environmental elements do we want to talk about as we start to write the plan? So that'll be important as well. All right, in terms of land use and the report we did on that, some interesting things that we found on the right-hand side is just a bunch of colors on a map where we actually coded the development status of every map, of every parcel. So is it developed? Is it permanent open space? Is it undeveloped? Can it be redeveloped? Is it already committed for in terms of the development application and review process? Has it been approved? And what we find is less than 25% of the land is actually quote unquote in play, meaning it's undeveloped and unprotected. And if you look at the distribution, it's this darkest color blue, it's all over the place. So if you just follow the undeveloped land you have, which that property owner may or may not want to do something with their land, but if they do, they would then look at the UDO and the plan to see what they can do. Just as an outsider, again, opinion, you've done so good at keeping your infrastructure tight in terms of a footprint. If you look at where all that blue is, you're now would go to an expansion model of infrastructure, which is expensive to do that. But what does it mean? What is the return for doing that? But right now, just at the first blush, you start to see where these areas are in blue are actually the undeveloped parcels we could find within your planning jurisdiction. So what that means is if you look at those 16 66,000, sorry, new homes that want to come here. If you let them, do they land in the blue? Or do we have to go and look at maybe like your last plan that had some infill strategies and redevelopment strategies? Is that how you want to fit and accommodate the development? Or does the number come down? Those kind of things. I actually think that might be the crux of the planning process. I think that might be the most controversial thing as we talk about the scenarios and the growth numbers and the like, is trying to land on how much more growth do we want to accommodate within our plan. I think that's going to be a really important question for this community. Now, we also can't put our head in the sand and ignore what has already been approved but just has not come out of the ground yet. There are other challenges and opportunities that are coming because development's been approved. You just don't know it yet because it hasn't been constructed. So we worked with town staff and an inventory of what we call committed development. Now, I just want to be clear, we put a very broad definition on this. So it's things that have been approved, recommended through planning board, approved by town council, but it's also some things that are in review. And I want to give the CAC credit. They called me out on this and said it's too confusing. So I'm actually breaking it apart again. So I have the things that are going to be approved will be in one bucket, and all the things that are in play to be discussed will be in a second bucket, so that you can actually understand what's been approved so far versus what's still under conversation. As you look at it, though, north to south, it's all over the place. And you know this because you've lived it going through the review process. Now, just before anybody freaks out, they're not as big as all those blobs are. Those purple blobs represent the boundary of the project that was the petition. It could be that they're only putting a couple of townhomes in a golf course community that's already there. The way we had to do it, using the PIN numbers of parcels, that whole golf course got looked at. So like down here at Southern Pines Golf Course, they're not redeveloping the whole thing. You know, it's just some infill development that's going on in there. But in terms of the application, that was the parcel. This is also interesting, and again, I'm telling you what you already know, and I'm trying to do it in a little bit of a unique way. What I did was proportionately, these bars are proportionate to each other in terms of how much square footage they might represent in the community. So you can see the amount of apartments that have been approved recently versus the footprint for single-family detached homes and townhomes, and then the non-residential categories as well. You've been getting a lot of multifamily applications lately. Frankly, the entire country has. It's the easy thing to build right now. The banks want to lend for it. The developers want to build it. You know, it checks the boxes about affordable, attainable housing that people are talking about. So you're not unique in this situation, but people are starting to have reactions to this, right? Sometimes visceral reactions to this. So that's something we're thinking about as we go through the planning process. We also looked at sort of how the community is zoned right now. So what future have you set yourself up for? The majority of land within the planning area is zoned for residential uses. So right now, when you look at that demand that wants to come here, you're kind of set up to be a residential community in terms of land mass. You've got commercial, obviously, in downtown and some of your major corridors. And again, the largest, most controversial projects that we've been able to find all tend to come in as planned developments right now, right? They're coming in under that process. Zoning by right process, which means a negotiation and conditions and all that kind of good stuff go with it. Now, one of the ideas that is kind of bubbled up and formulated enough that I want to present it to you today quickly is this approach to community character. So one of the problems we have is, do you have a Fuel Pizza anywhere around here? Do you know? No. All right, Fuel Pizza in Charlotte. I should have told you I'm from Charlotte. Fuel Pizza it's a pizza chain. We can find another chain example here, but Fuel Pizza in Charlotte, I can go find one that's in uptown Charlotte and it's part of a big skyscraper. I can find one in an old gas station that's been converted in Huntersville. It's a beautiful little building. I can find one out in a suburban strip mall. That's the same use all over the place. It's the same color on the map. It's a reddish color on the map usually. So what we're kind of advocating for as we write this plan is get character right, and then land use will fall in line with it. Land use is just one component of character. So as part of that, we're starting to have this conversation where we're going to have a character first plan for Southern Pines, and we're going to talk about it in three different buckets here. One is foundational things, So what sets the foundation is the development pattern, the type, location, intensity. How do the different frameworks serve that pattern? So greenway systems, stormwater systems, street systems, and then the finishes. So what does it look like when you walk down the street? How tall are buildings? Those kind of things we call the finishes. And I'll give you a couple examples here. So in terms of the foundational elements, we're going to really tie everything to character, and where you may have certain land uses that actually fall across different characters, we're going to start to call it that. And so I'll give you an example. If we have a character that's all about residential, the home that you build in West Southern Pines versus horse country versus a golf course community and the like might all be different. They might look a little bit different. A commercial entity as well. I mean, just to kind of be simple about it, a commercial product on a strategic corridor in horse country might have a cupola, a gable roof, those kind of things, where it would not have that in downtown. It would have a straight line parapet and all that kind of stuff. So I know I'm getting architecture geeky on you, but you'd have different feels even though it's the same fuel pizza in my example. So we're really trying to focus on character as the foundational element. And that way, when we assign it to the map, it's more intentional about what your outcomes are, right? It's not just use, but it's going to be about character. And so when we describe that character, we'll give you the paragraphs that you're used to seeing in a CLRP document, but we also break it down into the different design elements. And we'll say, in that type of character, the streets and blocks should look like this. Open space and natural resource protection should do something else. Lot size and building placement, building types and their massing, and then different transportation considerations. Those are those seeds we'll start to plant that the UDO will pick up later in terms of enforcement and implementation. We'll also do some framework elements. So for this as an example, we looked at different corridors. Right now, it feels like driving around, all of your roads were made to move cars, but do we prioritize them? Which ones are going to be pedestrian first, maybe vehicle second when you're competing for space and those kind of things? So we would map that. This was another community in Howard County, Maryland saying, well, everybody wants to be close to a park, but who really is close to a park? So we look at catchment areas for parks. We would look at when you design streets based on the development type around it, how do you design it in the way that benefits development and the mobility across? We were having a good conversation about crossing the street earlier. Well, how do we make sure that we send the message of kind of what we want in terms of street design? And then open space. Some communities we work in, people say they want open space, but they really don't ask for what kind of open space they want. And so, we've even done it where there's open space in an industrial development. If you end up getting a brewery or a food kitchen or something like that, and you can have a half an acre where they spill out, that becomes a really cool place. So you can do that, or if it's more rural setting, how do you do it? Or even in neighborhoods, how do you want to define open space in neighborhoods? This is some of that stuff I told you we're going to be doing focus area studies on, so there'll be hand drawings that get done, and we'll be doing artist renderings to try to set the tone on character as well. These are the finishes, like we were saying earlier. And this is just to kind of set ourselves for thinking outside the box as we continue between now and plan adoption. This is from Londonderry, New Hampshire, and they said, we hate multifamily. I said, well, what if it was a farm? Would you hate multifamily? Oh, maybe it'd be all right. So, well, how do you design it where the barn are condominiums, and then you have townhomes, the chicken coops or the garages, those kind of. So before you say you hate something, let's tell me why you hate it, because we might be able to find a way around it and a compromise. So we've kind of done that. On the left-hand side, you see those are duplex homes, but how can you make them look like single-family homes? A lot of times character can take care of the things that we're really most threatened by. This is an example where it was infill development, and we tried to make sure, well, if it's going to infill, how do we require that the roof lines be the same, the building footprints be the same, the open space, the street network, so that it looks like it was always there. It was meant to be there. Versus something that was sandwiched in later. So again, those are all finishing elements we can talk about with character. And then we'll also have these town-wide elements where we just talk about context and the like. And so those things will also make it into the plan as we go forward. All right, infrastructure. Again, it's fun to talk about the land use and development, but we have to be able to support it. So we did work with the different town departments to get a good pulse on what's happening right now. So when you look at water supply, you have plenty of capacity available for the development we'd be thinking about for the next 20 years. It's a town-owned plant, but it's operated by contract, which is interesting. You have the asset, but it's actually operated by somebody else. I won't read all these words to you, but really what's interesting here is that they said, yeah, generally we're okay, but if we have to do more capital, extension of service and the like, capital spending in order to keep up with development, it's going to take away money from operation and maintenance, because we only have so much money. So in that regard, there is not a, well, you can maybe call it a downside of development, but there's going to be a reallocation of resources if they have to extend services, and it's going to have an impact on your operation and maintenance as you go forward. When you look at sewer, again, here the service is provided by Moore County Utilities, so you're more of a customer, but you do maintain the collection system. So all the pipes in the ground are a big deal to you all, and so you got to keep track of those. And what's interesting here is you take a community that's full of pines, and it's one of your defining features, but they used clay pipe a lot. The one thing clay pipe hates are tree roots. So as tree roots get into the clay pipes, those are going to have to be repaired and can be very expensive at times, depending which clay pipe is being attacked at that time. There is a plan in place already for that, though. So, I mean, eyes wide open. People know that and are looking forward to it. But again, there's things that just need to be thought about as we look at growth and development. Stormwater management, at least right now, as I sit today on January 3rd, 4th, so I sit on January 4th, you're not required to have an MS4 Phase 2 permit, which is the Clean Water Act. Once you get past a certain threshold as an urbanized area, that may be something you have to consider. That makes stormwater a lot more regulated and a lot more formulaic as it goes through and reporting and getting permits and the like. But right now, it's been reported that there isn't widespread flooding. There are some isolated instances to look at, but at least when we did the plan for Pinehurst years ago, that was like one of the #1 issues, was just people just got the water off their property and flooded the property next door, and they didn't really care about it. And so luckily you don't have that problem. In terms of police protection, you can see you have 47 officers and an average response time of about 5 minutes. There's one officer for every 340 residents that you have here right now, which is pretty good compared to other places. Your parks and recreation system, you've got 13 parks that were volunteered to us and 12 miles of trail right now. You're a victim of your own success in certain ways. It's been talk about overstaffing, more space needed. That's because you're providing a good product, right? So more people want it, both in-town residents as well as people coming from out of town who want to be part of those programs. I was really excited to be able to meet with library staff. It's an asset within the community, and I mean, the numbers show it, but the conversations we've had prove it as well. So you have the main library, and then you got the Spark kiosk that's up north and west at Station 2. But more taken by the interview I had as much as the data. And so it's one of the last places you can go that's still free. I thought that was really interesting to talk about. And libraries are evolving. They're not just about books and tapes and things anymore, but it's about workforce preparation and extracurriculars and child learning and all that kind of good stuff that goes with it. And so we have to make sure that we safeguard and even think about the size of the library and its functions going forward if you are going to grow in population. Also got to meet with the fire protection representatives as well. So you have 45 career firefighters. Your average response time is 6 minutes and 5 seconds. Again, staffing, response time, and apparatus. So this is where you start to look at the way the town is laid out and where development might go. And, US 1's nice to get you up to Raleigh or down to Rockingham, but it's also hard to cross it sometimes when you're responding to an emergency. So wherever the development goes, we have to look at response times and those kind of things as well. In terms of transportation, this must be off base somewhere, right? No, I say full disclosure, my father's from Texas, so I mean, this is the kind of stuff we try to look for. But right now, again, I've told you this kind of in my opening, it feels like the car or truck is king right now on your transportation system and your streets. And so with this document, we might want to look at ways that we move people versus cars, and we define that as our unit of analysis, and then look at how we can maybe find sidewalks and pedestrian crossings and those kind of things. No surprise to you at all is that 78% of people right now from the Census Bureau report that they drive to their job. So again, your system is serving the main demand that's there. This is interesting, again, where you had 10% of people who work from home. that responded to the survey. So again, you have this, as your population grows, a lot of people are moving here for quality of life, but their job is somewhere else and they're working from home. And then this was interesting. It's in the transportation section, but the aha moment kind of came as we were looking at the labels on the categories. So 11.2% of people who moved here came from the same county, so Moore County, 7.3 from a different state, and you just kind of from abroad. So, but what's interesting here is these people are bringing ideas from where they came from. And it's threatening to people who are long-term residents here and others like. So this is where we have this kind of a little bit of friction of like, hey, you love Southern Pines for what it was, but as soon as you moved here, you changed it a little bit because we got a little bigger, a little more crowded, or a little more whatever. So this is actually just kind of puts to numbers one of those conversations I've been hearing about, which is just, you know, how do we keep the secret place and the special place we have as we grow? You know, how do you keep your heart and soul and mind? So full disclosure now, north is that way. Because the way, otherwise it wouldn't fit on the map. So US 1, downtown, West Southern Pines, 15501. We've just taken like some snapshots of your transportation system at this point. So right now, the first way we look at it is functional classification. And again, one of the conversations I was having earlier, we were talking about really when transportation breaks down is when roads that were meant to move people through Southern Pines are now the main street of Southern Pines. And so, for example, as you look, I don't even have to ask for the history because I can see the way the grids of streets used to line up between West Southern Pines and downtown area. US 1 came through and broke it. And so now that easy trip now has to come on US 1 and those kind of things. So now you're intermixing with people who just want to get through Southern Pines as quickly as they can. And it's creating just friction points on your system. So we try to look at what is the function of each road. And in theory, you should be able to pick up a connected system for regional travel and a connected system for local travel. That's when your system is really optimized. There are some breakages in yours. However, when you look at the volumes, and this again, I go back to that graphic of where you came from. This is all where you came from. Because for everybody who complained about traffic today in Southern Pines, I wish you could have left Charlotte with me this morning. Because it was awful, right? It's all perspective and it's all context and what your tolerance is set up for. But generally speaking, again, no surprise to you all, a lot of your traffic is using US 1, whether to come through or to use it to make a local connection. And then 15501 going up, you know, towards the circle is a lot of your traffic. The reason I want to show you this map is the areas in red are what are called level of service E. Now, we could spend 20 minutes talking about transportation jargon, but basically what happens is transportation professionals realize they don't have endless amounts of money. So they have to try to maintain a system at a level of service that while we all want A's on our report cards and the like, it's just not financially feasible. So normally what the level of service target is D as in dog or D as in David. So down here. So if a transportation professional comes here from somewhere else, they look at this and they're like, your congestion's not bad. And you know, if you're looking at this and they're like, we want to program dollars, they might say, you know what, 22 going into 2 into the traffic circle, you know how that backs up so crazy. We might need to put the money over there. Or, you know, start to look at some of the 15501 as it comes down. But generally speaking, using the standard that they use because funds are limited, not a lot of roads are popping up. So because of that, we have to go to like a stage 2 where we're asking people where they're seeing congestion in their day, and we'll try to identify those roadways. We also looked at accidents on the transportation system. Again, really interesting. My son is in college at NC State. Sorry. He's at NC State. And so I'll come home this way sometimes, you know, so I can come see something in Southern Pines on my way home. And so as you leave, you're doing 70 miles an hour, everything feels great, going, you get to Sanford, you're still supposed to be doing 55, you're probably more in that 65 range, and all of a sudden the traffic lights start in Southern Pines, right? And all of a sudden, all these accidents start showing up because you've provided a totally different feel and vibe and function for that road. And so we've got to look at that. How do you eliminate some of those rear end collisions and those kind of things? And there's ways to do it. And we were talking earlier, there's the three E's: education, enforcement, and then engineering. So sometimes you try to just have the police officer out there and they take care of it, but other times you got to reinforce it with engineering. So you got to put a median in or channelize a turn or something like that. But our folks will be looking at that a little bit because there's just too many accidents in a concentrated area.
How do you differentiate, because so many of those roads are things we have no control over, in the state federal roads. So
That's correct.
do you show us, like, here's your town road where there's an issue, you can do something about it?
Yep.
How do you blend those?
That's a perfect question because one of the edits I made.
Can you repeat the question?
Sure. Yeah. All right. So the question was, when you look at these roads, the town only has jurisdiction and responsibility over some of them. Then whether it's NCDOT or somebody else has jurisdiction and responsibility for other ones, how do you make that distinction and give recommendations to the town on what to do best? So we can put the recommendations in two buckets. One are coordination activities, so things we would tell you to ask NCDOT to do on their roads. But the reason I ask, and I promise he didn't see this question, is one of the comments we got was on that very topic. So we are including in the revised transportation report what's called your Powell bill map. The Powell bill map is used to determine what portion of the state gas tax comes back to Southern Pines. The way you do that is you have to have a map of whose jurisdiction it is for what road. We're putting that map in the document because there are times that, frankly, people will come screaming and yelling and saying, the town needs to fix 15501. Well, fix it too, it's just DOT has to do it. So this Powell bill map will be in the report. So if you ever wondered like which roads the town has to maintain and which ones they don't, that'll be in the report coming out. So it'll be interesting for everybody to see it. It's a good question. We also heard, about sidewalks, and we put the horse paths in that you only see here a glimpse of, and we have the greenway system. And as part of this, we look at the different development types that might be encouraged in certain places. If we want to move people and not just cars, we'll also look where we want to infill walks and those kind of things as well. Right now, it's primarily downtown and a couple of glimpses in West Southern Pines. But how do we extend that system out? But again, because of limited resources, how do we do it in places where the development will tend to promote walking as we go? We've also heard a little bit about transit as we go through here. We wouldn't be looking at a major big bus system, but things like you see here with the smaller buses and the like, local circulator might be important as you go forward. The idea of building complete streets. No longer let people out of building sidewalks and the like. The number one easiest way to build out the town system is to have either NCDOT do it when they improve a road or developer to put it in when they build a development. Every time you let somebody out of that, then the town has to pick that up later. And it's hard to do that. So building complete streets. That's it. I can tell by body language I should have had 3 breaks. But I wanted to get through it all so that I can answer any questions that you all have. But everything that we've to you today will be in writing. And you can read it, at whatever pace you want to. They're broken up by topics, so you don't have to read it or print out everything. But they will be on the project website. Again, I have a couple of phone calls I have to make. That's what's slowing me up. But we're targeting in the next few days to have those up for everybody because I want people to be able to read them as like a foundation before we come back to you on the 26th and talk about the future. I want you to understand the current conditions and trends that are coming. So with that, thank you for your patience. That was a long one.
We appreciate you being here.
Of course.
I just wanted to say, if anybody in the room is not on our email list, you can email our office and you can get on the email list so that when these reports come out, you'll get an email. If you saw this in the newspaper and you haven't had an opportunity to get on a list yet, my colleague Rachel Mann, who I will say has done yeoman's work on this project. When you were mentioning town staff, it's mostly Rachel, so thank you so much, Rachel. Rachel, nice job. But you can call our office, you can talk to Rachel, and she can help you out with getting you copies of anything that has come out in the past and get you on the email list so you'll be first to know when new stuff comes out in the future. And thank you to the members of the CAC who came here today. Thank you very, very much for being here to see and follow up on everything and see this presentation again, because Matt certainly added. And of course, thank you very much to members of the planning board that came and members of council that came, because when we see this stuff and interact with it each day, there's just these moments where you're like, we have to be very strategic with your time, and your time is very, very valuable. So thank you so much for being here to see this. So thanks.
Sure. I'll make it into a PDF just so that Fonson can jump on this.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yes. Sure, sure, sure. So in a traditional comprehensive plan, they tend to focus only on land use. So so it's either commercial, office, industrial, residential, and then it relies on the zoning ordinance or the unified development ordinance to try to put some more meat on the bones on it, talking about its height, its parking requirements, its landscaping, all of that. What we have found is in our planning is we pull some of that forward out of the UDO into the CLRP to set expectations. And so when we have a character district, we'll be commenting, and sometimes the example is the best thing, right? So let me do, So as we go through some of these things, the way they're written, we might put a clue in a character district that says, for example, in these types of developments, the backyard should be larger than the front. Okay, I don't tell you like a distance, like a setback should be this, 10 feet or 20 feet or whatever, but I'm basically saying by the backyard being bigger than the front yard, the building should be closer to the street. From a character district, what that does is there's a magic formula called 3-to-1. If you take the width of the road and you take the height of the buildings, you want to be 3 across, 1 high. Otherwise, people start to feel like the buildings are coming on top of them. If you look at all Old Town building, that's a pretty true principle. So we might put in some things like that to start to set the expectations for character, but then the zoning ordinance will pick up and actually say, like, front yard setback is 25 feet and the backyard setback is 10 or something like that. So the numbers part of it comes out. Another example is that I'm going to try as hard as I can to not put densities in this plan. I'm just going to be very forthcoming with you. I think densities belong in a zoning ordinance. They don't belong in a comprehensive plan. But what we would do is we would talk about what building types should be in each of these character districts. So we might say, you should have duplexes, or in another community, we said multifamily shouldn't have more than 6 units in a building. They wanted very small format multifamily. So we set those expectations here in character, but whatever density number that turns out to be, the zoning ordinance will figure that out. But we've set the tone for character, and we're trying to get the overall look and feel of a place that we want to achieve as part of this process. It lines up really nicely if and when, I'm not saying you're going to do this, but if and when you ever want to go to design guidelines for more than just the areas you're in now. If you wanted to do with your zoning, you can line up the zoning districts better with our plan. So we're trying to have character start here to have the focus on design and form and function guide those things rather than just be a math exercise. Clear as mud? Yeah. It's, yeah.
I have a quick follow-up to the question that Bill asked, which was a really good one.
Mhm.
The town does have an opportunity to either support or object to projects that DOT is contemplating within the jurisdiction, and even to propose funding for projects that we think are important, and that's a very competitive process, but sometimes you can get those funded and on their radar that wouldn't be otherwise. And I think that's a big part of what that section of the CLRP would be used for in practice.
It also helps to time it when there's a PGA event or, because you're getting disproportionate amounts of money here because it's economic development. Yeah, so you want your list so that you're always ready, right? It's like when the old stimulus money came out, if you were shovel ready, all of a sudden you got money. You want to always be shovel ready with ideas so that you can get them into whatever you can.
And having a project in the plan is a requirement when you're requesting that federal funding.
Yep.
DOT roads.
That's correct. Did you have a question? Just comfortable? Okay. Sir?
Considering the huge interest that you described in those who will be coming into the general areas of north of North County, that type thing, and those specifically who would be interested in coming here, being, in this particular area. And also factoring in trying to minimize congestion, on the heels of the transportation piece. In general, is it advantageous for growth to happen within Southern Pines or on the periphery of Southern Pines?
Yeah. Yeah, so the question is, with all the growth pressures coming on that 421 corridor we were talking about, as well as even I'll just say the region, is it better to have development at the edge or the periphery of the Southern Pines planning area, or maybe more inside it, like it's been going on? It's a great question, first of all. If people, some of it depends what type of development you're looking at. But if you're putting residential growth at the periphery, thinking that it will minimize traffic, they still have to come in every day for their daily needs. So whether it's work or shopping or whatever, they're still going to count on Southern Pines to be their center. So you may have actually added maybe not more trips, but longer trips. So if you have longer trips, then that's an issue. In terms of trying to figure out kind of how much, one of the things, I guess I'm going to put it out there. I'm going to take your question and make a statement that I'm answering your question, but you may not say I'm answering your question because I'm introducing another thought. At least I told you, right? And I'm going to come back to the character thing here as well. One of the things that's really interesting to me as Southern Pines grows, if it grows, is one, if you challenged me to find a city in the entire United States that is still thriving but not growing, I don't know if I can. Even if it's slowly growing, they're still growing. If you take Detroit, if you take Cleveland back in the 70s, some of those places, as soon as you start shrinking, budgets start shrinking, things start deteriorating, you start to get a bad rap. It's just, sometimes, at least any growth is usually a sign of a thriving community. Now, it doesn't mean you open the floodgates if you don't want to, but I'm just saying, I'd be hard pressed to find a place that doesn't have positive growth and is thriving. So that's point number one. But point number two is, when we try, that's why I use the term just big enough, is because when you think about how much growth might come, to me, the best example in Southern Pines are the pine trees on like 2, or as an example. I don't know how you all get away with it that NCDOT doesn't want to cut all those down, right? Because the first car that veers 2 inches off the road hits a pine tree. And as soon as they sue, NCDOT says, that's it, pine trees are gone. I need 12-foot clearance and all this, all the stuff they do everywhere else. So in some ways, I would want to get big enough that my 2-lane roads work, but I don't know if I want 4-lane roads. You see what I'm saying? Like, there's an equilibrium, because you will lose character if you just try to size for growth. So I think as we read this needle, Tallahassee, Florida is the same way. They have beautiful oak trees and they have the hanging moss. So they've actually policy constrained some of their roads and said these are always going to be 2-lane roads, even if they fail. They'd rather see congestion than widening and the trees gone. So they're called policy constrained roads. It'd be interesting if we looked at the roads you have, like, would you want to policy constrain them so that you don't lose the charm of the pine trees, as an example? So I did an end around. I think I tried to answer your question, but I did introduce a couple extra thoughts too. But things to consider for sure.
Can you help me understand, when you talk about the form-based code and trying to create design guidelines?
Sure, sure, sure. So a couple of things. A pure form-based code, it'd be hard to find. Do you know? I don't know of a pure form-based. The city of Miami tried it. They're the best example. They wanted it really bad. But when push comes to shove and you're adopting it, you need some parts of a conventional code, whether it's permitted uses or something. Because in a true form-based code, if you want to put an asphalt plant next to a school, as long as they're both beautiful, you shouldn't care in a form-based code world. Yeah. No, and I don't disagree with you. I mean, that's obviously an extreme example. But, another example might be if you put in a building that you would like to have as a live-work unit. And if the live-work unit, you want to have a business that is a restaurant. Well, if you do that, then your code has to have a different first floor height requirement, potentially sprinkler system, all that kind of stuff. But do you build it for that just in case, or do you, so a lot of times councils, again, I can't think of one who hasn't done a hybrid.
I can think of actually a lot of examples of jurisdictions that have done a small district, which is almost purely form.
But they
and
try it.
There's almost always one or two little examples of something comes along. Both of them look beautiful, but you happen to have weapons manufacturing next to a daycare. And even if the weapons manufacturing is harmless, it's just that the daycare and the weapons manufacturing next to each other are kind of like, this doesn't feel very good. They both look beautiful. They both meet the form-based code. Downtown Bozeman, Montana, has had some incidences where issues come up. It's like, oh my gosh, these are both allowed, but everyone universally agrees this probably still isn't a good idea somehow. So
Yeah.
you have to be careful. Yeah.
Crematorium is the issue that's coming up nationally.
Okay.
Clear, I have one in my backyard.
You do, yeah.
So to fully answer your question though, so even if you did a form-based code, there usually would be a hybrid of some type. I just want to be clear on it. If you do a form-based code, it is a law, right? Because it's a zoning district, it's in your zoning ordinance, it's a law. When you do design guidelines, they can either be suggestive, or you can put them into your codes and the like as well. When it comes to design guidelines, I find there's two forms of them. There's the ones that require an architect, because you say, I want a parapet roof, and I want a cupola, and all this stuff, and people are like, what is that? Or there's the ones you can count, and it'll say, every 10 feet needs to change 18 inches, this percentage needs to be windows, and anybody can figure that out with numbers. So in terms of design guidelines, there's like, intermediate and advanced in terms of how you do it. The one part to, again, I use the term to thread the needle, is in North Carolina, the different special interest groups have gotten really good at every time there's design guidelines, they go to the state and get something exempted. And so it's really hard to regulate single-family development right now with design guidelines. But if you do, you call it a PDD here? What's your plan? PD. Sorry, a PD here. That's one thing I'll tell you around the country. It's every letter of the alphabet. They're all different for that. But if you do a PD, then the applicant is voluntarily agreeing to do some of those. And so the guidelines can be used in order to make that requirement as well. Design guidelines are probably a little less imposing than if they were in a form-based code exactly.
We could do like design guidelines and districts within those.
Mhm.
Like there is an area where this makes sense, an area where that makes sense.
Yep. Yes. Yeah, and I'll tell you, for those of you who've been working with me, I tried to start to create those districts, and I can do them, and then there's like what I call the tablecloth in between, where like there's 37 different things happening in this area, and it makes it cool and eclectic, but I don't know how to describe it, like what's going on there. So it's hard to give it a name and all that kind of stuff. So, but no, you could do that as part of this process. And then, not to throw another term out there, but your design guidelines can either be written in code, or they could be what are called pattern books. Pattern books would have pictures and diagrams and stuff of what you should try to do. Did I miss anything you want to add from a? Okay. No, for BJ, I want to make sure, because He's the implementer. I've written a lot of zoning ordinances, but it's been some time. The battles, like, I think the last one I did, we had 21 meetings about landscape berms. And when we were done, I said, I'm out of here. Like, I can't focus on just that for 21 meetings. So, to their credit, they didn't have zoning before, and then they had zoning. So it's a big jump. But that was it for me. Anything else? Paul?
If you would want to take a quick minute on the fact that we are not unique in this particular area. You have Southern Pines, Aberdeen, et cetera, you know, broader area, and there's no question that we're an attractant, right? A lot of
Oh, yeah.
people want to come here, stay here, we want to decide how we want to look like as we evolve in that process.
Yeah.
So it's important, and you've made that very clear to the CAC, that it's not just knowing about Southern Pines, it's knowing what's happening with your neighbors as well.
That's correct.
And are you doing what's maybe not as smart for you, because somebody else may or may not do something on their own? And
Yeah.
we have to be very mindful of that collective, because wherever the pressures are going to come from, we know where many of them are. As it continues to go, some are going to be in trouble, and a good number of them are going to be from people that want to be a part of this, you know, beautiful, wonderful area. So we have
Agree.
to collectively look at what's happening around, not just Southern Pines.
Totally agree. And that's why when you read the sixth book report, the policy and ordinance review, we actually reviewed everybody's plans and ordinances outside, all that were adjacent to you as well, because we want to know what's going on. And, you know, some communities have one opinion of growth, some communities have a different opinion of growth, and that demand wants to slide over in these different communities, because they still want to be in the region, the area. And if one community is making it harder, they're hoping the other community will make it easier. So, and sometimes you're stronger together if you can kind of band together on at least some issues. And other things, you know, just don't stop nicely at town boundaries. Like we've looked at where people live and work. Air quality is another one. It doesn't stop at the line, those kind of things. And so, yeah, you're stronger together for sure.
Matt, thanks for coming today.
All right. Thank you all. We'll see you again.